Hello everyone. Wishing you all good health, peace, and the courage to keep building the life you dream of. There are moments in life that feel like quiet victories, simple, yet full of meaning. As Ly Tieu Ca's new house finally stood complete, not just with bricks, but with love and hope. CEO Hung stood beside her, his eyes filled with vision. With a gentle smile, he spoke of new plans, not for mansions or power, but for family, warmth, and shared dreams. This is just the beginning, he said softly, gazing at the home they built together. And in that moment, Ly Tieu Ca realized he wasn't just building a house, he was building a future with her. The sun was just beginning to rise when the final tile was placed on the roof of the small house nestled at the foot of the hill. Dew still clung to the blades of grass, and a soft breeze carried the scent of wet earth and morning flowers. Ly Tieu Ca stood quietly outside the door, her hands resting gently on her belly, eyes misty with gratitude. Behind her, the house stood solid, not grand or luxurious, but sturdy, warm, and built with care. The wooden walls still smelled of fresh timber. The windows let in just enough light, and the little porch had space for a chair, where she could one day sit and watch Han play. She didn't hear the footsteps at first, but she felt them like a gentle wave of presence. She turned, and there he was. Hung. Still in his work clothes, boots, dusty, face slightly tired from another long day, but his eyes were alive with something she hadn't seen in a long time: hope. She's beautiful, he said, stepping up beside her, gazing at the finished house. She's ours, Tieu Ca whispered, voice trembling. Hung exhaled deeply, as though letting go of a weight he had been carrying for years. Then he looked at her, truly looked. I've been thinking a lot, he began softly, especially while watching this house come together. Brick by brick, nail by nail. Watching you walk barefoot on this land, sell guava by the roadside, feed Han under the shade of that tree. She smiled. You always say that like it's something extraordinary. It is, he said, stepping closer. This place, this life, it taught me what matters, and I want more of it. Not just in passing. Not just when I'm between flights. Tieu Ca's heart beat a little faster. What do you mean? I mean, Hung said, his voice more sure now. I want to build a farm here, expand it, chickens, ducks, even a small orchard. You and I, we can run it together. I'll reduce my time at the company, maybe even hand over operations to James. I want to be here, Tieu Ca, with you, with Han, with our family. She stared at him, unsure if she was hearing him right. You'd give all that up? I'm not giving anything up, Hung replied. I'm choosing something better. I've built factories, offices, contracts, but nothing has ever felt as meaningful as building this home for you. A tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Hung reached out, brushing his thumb gently across her jaw. Will you help me? He asked, almost like a vow. To build a life we don't have to escape from. Tieu Ca nodded slowly. Yes. I've always dreamed of a quiet life with you. I just didn't dare believe it would ever be real. It's real now, Hung whispered. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the rooftops and the nearby rice fields. Their hands found each other's warm, rough, real. Inside the house, little Han stirred in her crib, letting out a soft coo. It was the sound of a new beginning. The next few weeks were a gentle whirlwind. Hung kept his promise. He arrived early each morning, before the sun rose, sometimes bringing warm soy milk and sticky rice for Tieu Ca. Sometimes, He came with bags of seed, tools, or small sketches in his notebook plans for the orchard, a chicken coop, and even a small wooden sign that read, Han's Farm. Tieu Ca laughed when she saw it. "You're really serious about this?" she teased, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Hung looked at her with a softness that melted her doubt. "I've never been more serious." They planted rows of guava trees together, kneeling in the soil side by side. Hung struggled with the uneven ground, and Tieu Ca had to show him how to use the hoe properly. She laughed so hard when he nearly fell backward trying to chase a stubborn chicken that escaped the little fence. It was the kind of laughter she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. At night, they sat under the stars, with Han asleep nearby. Hung would rest his hand on Tieu Ca's shoulder, and she would lean into him, her heart slowly letting down walls built from heartbreak, fear, and lonely nights. But not everything was easy. One morning, a call came from Hung's assistant in Saigon. The company's biggest investor had backed out, and an urgent meeting was scheduled. There were murmurs of instability, and the board was growing anxious. "I'll handle it," Hung said, slipping his phone back into his pocket. Tieu Ca looked up from the basket of herbs she was sorting. "You should go, Hung. Your company needs you." He walked over and crouched beside her. "What about you?" "We'll be fine here," she said softly. "Han and I will wait. Just promise me you'll come back." Hung cupped her face gently. "There's nothing in that city that means more to me than what I've found here. I'll come back, always." He left that afternoon, kissing both her and Han goodbye with a heaviness in his chest. Days passed, then a week. Tieu Ca went about her routines, watering the saplings, feeding the chickens, sweeping the porch. But the quiet felt deeper without him. Each evening, she looked toward the road, waiting for headlights that didn't come. Then, one rainy evening, just as she was about to close the front door, a familiar voice called out, "Tieu Ca." She turned, eyes wide. Hung stood soaked from head to toe, a suitcase in one hand, a worn briefcase in the other. His smile was tired, but his eyes were burning with something fierce. "You came back," she breathed, tears rising. "I told them I'm done," Hung said, stepping into the light. "I handed in my resignation. I sold my shares. James will take over. I'm not going to live split between two lives anymore." He dropped the bags and wrapped her in his arms, rain and all. "I choose you. I choose Han. I choose this farm, this house, this peace." Tieu Ca couldn't speak. She could only hold him tighter, rain falling around them like a soft applause from heaven. And inside, baby Han laughed in her crib like she knew, in her tiny heart, that their forever had finally begun. The days that followed Hung's return were filled with warmth, quiet joy, and the scent of earth and blossoms. The small farm they had nurtured together slowly came to life, not just in the rows of young trees, but in the laughter that echoed between wooden walls, in the meals cooked side by side, in the quiet prayers Tieu Ca whispered at night, thanking the heavens for second chances. Hung adjusted quickly to life away from boardrooms and concrete towers. He built a simple office in the corner of the house, where he occasionally reviewed designs and offered advice to his brother James. But his true work was in the garden, planting, fixing, feeding, building. "City man's hands are finally turning rough," Tieu Ca teased one afternoon as they carried baskets of fresh vegetables. "Good," Hung said, smiling. "They're finally worthy of holding yours." Tieu Ca blushed, but her eyes sparkled with something deeper than trust. Little Han, now learning to walk, would toddle after chickens and tumble into her father's arms. Every giggle from their daughter reminded them of why they chose this life. Every sunset they watched from the porch reminded them of how fragile peace was, and how precious. But peace was rarely permanent. One morning, while preparing breakfast, Tieu Ca heard Hung's voice speaking low on the phone in the next room. He sounded tense. "I understand, but I'm not going back. That life is over for me. Please respect that." There was a pause. Then he added, more firmly, "I'm not leaving my family behind again." When he returned to the kitchen, Tieu Ca looked at him carefully. "Everything okay?" Hung forced a smile. "Just some pressure from investors who still want me involved in big projects. They're offering a huge amount, but I don't care." She reached across the table and held his hand. "I trust you. Just don't forget what matters most." He looked into her eyes and nodded. "I never will." A few days later, something unexpected happened. A black car pulled into their yard. From it stepped a woman dressed in elegant, city-style clothes. She removed her sunglasses slowly and looked around. "Hello," she said softly. "I'm looking for Mr. Hung." Tieu stepped forward cautiously, holding Han in her arms. "He's inside. May I ask who you are?" The woman gave a small smile. "My name is Mai. I'm an old friend. I didn't know he had left everything behind." Mai hesitated. Tieu Ca's grip on Han tightened just slightly. And in that moment, the wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of rain, of memories, and of choices yet to be made. In a world that constantly pushes us to chase success, status, and wealth, it is easy to lose sight of what truly matters. CEO Hung once lived in the spotlight of power and prestige. He had everything the world could offer, except peace, in his heart. It wasn't until he stepped away from the noise and returned to a simple life with Ly Tieu Ca and their child that he discovered something far more valuable than any business deal: love, family, and belonging. This story reminds us that true happiness is not found in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in quiet mornings with loved ones, in shared laughter, in the safety of being accepted just as we are. Sometimes, the most courageous thing we can do is walk away from the life we built to protect the life we truly want. Choosing love does not mean giving up, it means growing into a version of ourselves that honors what our hearts truly need. Hung chose to stay. He chose to plant roots instead of chasing clouds. And in doing so, he taught us all that the most successful people are not always the ones with the biggest titles, but the ones who come home.